to another action-packed, fun-filled joyride on one of my videos. I want to do a brief, just share some thoughts. This is not too planned out. I do try to think about most of my videos before I do them and have a brief outline so I don't lose my train of thought or forget something really cool I wanted to say. But I'm going to kind of wing it a little bit more on this one. I just have 3 little sentences here. And I'm going to title this one, The Myths of Atheism. Now, there are a lot of myths of atheists and atheism. And this is rampant in the YouTube videos that you see when atheists and Christians or atheists and whoever are going at it in the arena of ideas, which I honestly think is wonderful, by the way. I love the freedom of speech. I love sharing the ideas, and nothing is more refreshing to me than an atheist. I'm not glad that they're atheists, I guess, but the idea that they would seek to properly represent my view, that they would seek to have an honest dialogue in our free country, and they understand that in an Islamic country and many other countries, they wouldn't be able to have this debate. They would be killed or shunned or have their family raped and shot or any of those wonderful things that a lot of those freedom-loving countries do. And I love to have a good dialogue. Even if the person doesn't go away agreeing with me, if we can at least communicate our ideas to each other, we've done a lot of work. So anyway, with all that said, I've noticed some consistencies among atheists, and these are things that are not true. Not saying anyone's purposely being dishonest, but I think we can sometimes fool ourselves into thinking we're something we're not. The number one thing that I see atheists do that they claim about themselves is that they're unbiased. That they are somehow in a realm of super objectivity, and they're not allowing any of their personal biases or any personal experience to get involved. We're just looking at the facts. Well, the truth is, everybody, no matter how hard we try, and I try extremely hard to be as unbiased as possible, and even at times I still catch myself allowing bias to sometimes influence my arguments. Now, I've worked very hard at this, and I feel like I look at things very objectively. But still, there's always something there. I have a Christian worldview, so that obviously influences me. For the good, I believe. But anyway, the point is, a lot of atheists think that they're unbiased, when you're not. Everyone has a sort of bias, and everyone looks at it. And a lot of times, the people that have fooled themselves into thinking they're completely unbiased are the most biased. Now, that's not in every case, but I've seen a lot. Is that their scientific conclusions are objective. I could give example after example. Much of the scientific things that come to your ears through popular magazines of stuff, the information has been spun before it gets to you. Now, not in every case, but there are a lot of cases. For instance, I could document for you, just for an example, there was a homosexual that had a theory about the hypothalamus, part of the brain, and its size, and whether it correlated to the tendency to homosexuality. He was basically trying to prove that it's not a sin, it's something you're born with, and that you can't help it, so therefore, you know, the God of the Bible is not true and all that. Okay, nice. But later on, after other people had examined his research, found out he just completely lied. And I could give you example, and he even admitted he lied later, of scientists who go into the experiment unbiasedly, with basically a circular reasoning. They start with their conclusion, and then they seek to prove their conclusion, and so therefore they find and see only what they want to see. And this happens a lot with atheistic science. And not to mention the fact that what does atheism add to science, and what does being a Christian take away from science? I would do a whole video on that idea, because there's really nothing there. Idea that they only believe in science. No, you got a lot of faith. In fact, in some cases, atheists have a lot more blind faith than they claim Christians do. Now, there's a misrepresentation there, because in Christianity and the Bible, faith is merely trust in what you know to be true. So it's trust. It's not blind faith. I'm going off evidence. I have a CA creation. Okay, I have a conscience that tells me right and wrong. Evolution could not produce a conscience, okay? And that has nothing to do with social standards. But anyway, long story short, that's not my discussion here. But my point is, they pretend as if they have no faith in anything. Well, let me give you an example. The law of biogenesis states that no non-life can produce life. And I think that goes right along with common sense. A rock, you're not going to see a plant grow out of a rock for no apparent reason. So atheistic scientists, starting with the presupposition that there is no God, not necessarily seeking the truth whether there is one, well, we've got to come up with something. So we got to come up with these theories of abiogenesis. So they're all theories. They're absolutely 100% unprovable, especially based on what we know to be scientific fact. But yet, this is what the atheist has placed his faith in. It's absolutely a faith proposition. Another thing, I was reading a book by Carl Sagan where he talks about the God of the gaps. Creationists just find things they can't explain and then they fill in those gaps with God. Well, an argument that can be used against you is not a good argument, because atheists say, well, one day we'll figure it out. So they fill in all the gaps with one day we'll figure it out. Well, I've started calling that science of the gaps. One day science will figure it out. Well, common sense will tell you, I know a lot of you aren't going to agree with me, and that's fine. We're in a free country, you don't have to. But common sense will tell you there's some things science will never figure out. And that's just the dirty little secret. That's the truth. No matter what theory you come up with, no matter what experiment you can do in a lab, you will never, ever, 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 ever reproduce abiogenesis. And even if you came up with something you could do in a lab, you still got the 1 in 300 billion trillion drillion chance that that's even remotely the way it could have occurred. So that takes a lot of faith, because you're telling me, you're expecting me to believe that something came from nothing. Now, I know atheists have a problem with that saying, but you are saying that non-life produced life, life sprung out of non-life. You're expecting me to believe that there was no life, i.e. nothing, and then something came out of it, i.e. life. Sorry, I don't believe that. It defies common sense. It defies logical argumentation. It's an emotional argument. It's based on faith, and it starts with the presupposition that there cannot possibly be a God. To me, if atheists were being honest with themselves, they would start with the no presuppositions and see where the evidence lays. And I think Christians could do the same thing. I try to do that. The reason I believe in God is because the evidence is so strong. Finally, I would say I think, atheists are a little bit hypocritical in claiming to be unbiased, to not use any type of faith, and that they're always objective. Now, I'm not saying all my atheist friends are claiming this, but an awful lot of atheists on YouTube claim this, and they're just dead